I want you to stop for a moment and examine something you have never examined with full honesty. Not your bank account, not the list of things left undone, not the promises you made and did not keep. I want you to examine the posture of your mind in the first moments of this morning, because I know what that posture was. I have studied it in thousands of men across 2.5 decades of research into why some men rise and others do not. And I can tell you with the precision of a man who has sat across from the wealthiest and the most defeated souls in the same era of American life exactly what was happening in your mind before your feet touched the floor. You were bargaining, not with a person, not with a circumstance. You were bargaining with your own day before it had properly begun, already calculating what you might avoid, what you might delay, what you might merely survive rather than conquer. Already feeling the weight of yesterday pressing forward into this morning, then conquer. Already feeling the weight of yesterday pressing forward into this morning, as though defeat were a physical object that follows a man from room to room and will not be left behind. That feeling, the feeling that you are already behind before the day has produced a single demand, is not a report on your circumstances. It is not a verdict on your character. It is not evidence that life has assigned you to a lesser portion than other men. It is a report on the last thought you permitted your mind to dwell upon before you surrendered to sleep. And it is the first thought you allowed to occupy your mind when you opened your eyes. And that is entirely within your power to change. I am Napoleon Hill, and what I am about to tell change. I am Napoleon Hill, and what I am about to tell you is not a collection of pleasant encouragements assembled for men who wish to feel better about drifting. It is the most practical instruction I have ever organized, drawn from the laws of the subconscious mind, confirmed in the lives of men who built great things from nothing, and available to you this very night. There is one move, a single precise internal act that a man can make in the first moments of waking that determines whether the day ahead belongs to him or to the accumulated force of his fears. I'm going to tell you exactly what that move is, why it works, and what it will do to your life if you practice it without exception. Beginning tonight, Part 1. What actually happens to your mind while you sleep? Why the morning is the most dangerous and most powerful moment of the day. I want to tell you about a man who sat at a telegraph key in a small railway station ticking out messages for other men's business at $30 a month. He was not a young man with the excuse of inexperience. He had reached the age at which most men have made their peace with what they are. The age at which ambition, if it has not yet been satisfied, begins to feel like a wound. Most men have made their peace with what they are. The age at which ambition, if it has not yet been satisfied, begins to feel like a wound rather than a fire. He was 40 years old. He had no capital. He had no reputation that extended beyond the borders of his small post. He had no powerful friends who might have opened a door for him and spared him the labor of building one himself. By every outward measure, this man was finished. Not ruined, simply finished. Settled into the groove that circumstance had cut for him, moving through his days with the rhythm of a man who has ceased to ask whether the rhythm might be changed. And then something happened, not outside him. Outside him, very little had changed. The railway station was the same. The wage was the same. The country stretching west beyond the window was the same vast, unsettled territory it had always been. What changed was inside. Specifically, and I want you to mark this carefully, always been. What changed was inside. Specifically, and I want you to mark this carefully. What changed was the thought he chose to plant in his mind before he closed his eyes at night, and the thought that was waiting for him when he opened them in the morning. He formed in that small station a definite purpose, not a wish, not a vague and comfortable aspiration that permitted him to feel ambitious without demanding anything of him. A definite, specific, consuming purpose, to build a railroad that would cross the great, unsettled West and unite two oceans without capital, without reputation, without a single outward resource that could have made this purpose seem anything other than the fancy of a man who had been sitting at a telegraph key too long. But something happened to that man after he planted that purpose. His mind, which had been occupied, as most men's minds are, with the details of immediate circumstance, began to organize itself around the new commanding idea. And the results of that reorganization produced what I can only describe as one of the most stupendous individual achievements in the history. And the results of that reorganization produced what I can only describe as one of the most stupendous individual achievements in the history of American industry. His name was James J. Hill, and the Great Northern Railway, which he built without government subsidy, without the advantages that other men in his field had enjoyed, beginning at the age at which most men declare themselves too old to begin, stands as permanent testimony to what a definite purpose, properly planted in the subconscious mind and watered by the repetition of deliberate thought, can produce. I tell you, and watered by the repetition of deliberate thought can produce. I tell you this story not to produce in you the temporary warmth of action for another man's achievement. I tell it because it contains the most important practical instruction I can offer. That the transformation in James J. Hill's life did not begin with an action performed upon the world. It began with a thought committed to the mind before sleep. Now, let me explain to you precisely what the subconscious mind does while you are asleep, because this is the key to everything that follows. The subconscious mind does not rest. This is not a figure of speech. It is a fact as reliable as any fact in the science of the natural world. While the body lies still and the conscious reasoning mind withdraws from its duties of examination and judgment, the subconscious continues its work without pause, filing the impressions of the day, deepening the grooves of the thoughts that have been most repeated, and preparing those grooves to receive the first impressions of the following morning with a force that no other hour of the day can match. The best time to work upon the subconscious mind, to give it deliberate instructions that it will carry out through the hours of sleep and deliver back to the conscious mind in the morning, is in the moments just before you surrender to sleep. At that hour, the conscious mind is lowering its guard. The sentinel that ordinarily stands at the gate, examining every suggestion that tries to enter and either admitting it or turning it away, is beginning to step back from its post. And in those moments, since suggestions pass to the subconscious mind with conviction and repetition, find their way to its deepest chambers with a directness that is not available at any other hour. I prove this to my own satisfaction through a test so simple that any man may confirm it himself in a single night. Tell yourself with conviction at the precise moment when you are about to fall asleep that you intend to wake at a specific hour. Not merely hope to wake. Tell your subconscious mind with the certainty of a man giving an order he expects to be carried out. I will wake at 4, and then release the thought with complete confidence that it will be done. The subconscious mind will wake you at that hour as reliably as if someone had come to your bed and touched you on the shoulder. I have tested this hundreds of times. It does not fail. Now ask yourself the question that this demonstration demands. If I can instruct my subconscious mind to wake me at a precise hour and it will do so without fail, why have I not formed the habit of giving? If I can instruct my subconscious mind to wake me at a precise hour and it will do so without fail, why have I not formed the habit of giving it instructions far more important than the hour of waking? The answer for most men is that they have never understood that the subconscious mind is available for instruction. They treat it as a thing that happens to them rather than a power that serves them. They permit the dominant thoughts of the day, the worries, the frustrations, the accumulated evidence of things that have not gone as they wish to flow unexamined into the subconscious as they drift towards sleep, and then wonder when they wake into the same heaviness the next morning why the heaviness will not leave. The heaviness will not leave because you have been commissioning it every night. You have been sending the subconscious mind to work on the fears that were most prominent in your conscious thoughts at the end of the day. And the conscious thoughts at the end of the day. and the subconscious, which does not question the wisdom of its instructions, which does not distinguish between a thought of faith and a thought of fear, and does not prefer the one over the other, simply works on whatever you have given at night and delivers result in the morning. The man who goes to sleep dwelling on his defeats will wake surrounded by them. This is not metaphor. This is the mechanical operation of a law as indifferent to your preferences as gravitation. The man who goes to sleep having planted a definite purpose in his subconscious mind with conviction, with repetition, with the emotion of a man who has genuinely decided, will wake into something entirely different. He will find that the night has not been wasted, that the subconscious has been at work, that plans and ideas and a sense of direction are available to him in the morning that were not available to the drifting man, because the drifting man was not commissioning anything worth finding. The morning that were not available to the drifting man, because the drifting man was not commissioning anything worth finding. The morning is the most dangerous and the most powerful moment of the day. Dangerous because it is the hour when the subconscious mind delivers whatever was planted the night before with the greatest force, and the first impressions of the waking mind settle into place with unusual permanence and powerful for exactly the same reason. The question is only this: what have you been planting? Part 2. The feeling of being behind is not a fact. How the law of hypnotic rhythm turns morning anxiety into a permanent condition. I want to describe for you one of the most instructive scenes I have ever encountered in the long history of men who pursued great things and lost them. A young man's uncle was seized by the fever for gold that swept through the American West in an earlier generation and went out to dig and grow rich. He staked a claim. The American West in an earlier generation and went out to dig and grow rich. He staked a claim. He worked it with a pick and a shovel, and in the determination of a man who has committed his last resource to a single venture. After weeks of labor, the shining ore appeared. He covered the mine, went home to Maryland, told his relatives and neighbors of the find, and organized the resources necessary to bring the ore to the surface. They went back. They mined the first car and shipped it to a smelter. The returns confirmed everything. One of the richest veins in Colorado. A few more cars of that ore would clear every debt. Down went the drills, up went the hopes, and then the vein disappeared. They drilled on desperately. They found nothing. And after the particular desperation that belongs to men who have committed everything and found nothing at the end of it, they made the decision that I have come to regard as the most instructive failure in the study of human achievement. They quit. They sold the machinery to a junk man for a few hundred and took the train back home. The junk man was not a man of science, but he was a man of sufficient wisdom to seek counsel before committing his money. He called in a mining engineer. The engineer studied the situation and produced his calculations. The vein had not disappeared. It had shifted along a fault line that the previous owners had not known to look for, and the engineer's calculations showed precisely where it could be found again. It was found exactly 3 feet from where those men had stopped drilling. The young man who had helped his uncle in this venture was named Darby. He was young enough that defeat had not yet permanently settled into him, and honest enough with himself to examine the lesson his defeat contained. He went into the business of selling life insurance, and he said to himself, and I want you to hear these precise words because they are the words of a man who transformed a catastrophe into a governing principle. I stopped 3 feet from gold, but I will never again stop because men say no to me when I ask them to buy insurance. Darby became one of fewer than 50 men in the entire country who sold more than $1 million of life insurance in a single year. Now I want to apply this story to your mornings because its application is exact. The man who wakes feeling behind has stopped drilling. Not in a Colorado mind, in his own mind. The habit of morning defeat, the groove of waking into heaviness, into the feeling that the day is already against him before it has produced a single demand, is the fault line he has not known to look for. The purpose that should be found 3 feet from where he stopped is waiting. He has simply stopped drilling for it. And here is where the law hypnotic rhythm must be understood, because the law that explains why this groove, once cut, deepens without any effort on the part of the man who is deepening it. Nature uses this law to make the dominant habits of the mind permanent. This is not a punishment. It is in nature's economy and efficiency. Nature takes the thoughts and actions a man repeats most often and makes them automatic, so that his energy is not spent each time on deciding whether to do what he has always done. The mind settles into the grooves it has worn most deeply, and the needle of thought follows those grooves as naturally as water follows the channel it has carved through years of flowing. This is the law that works magnificently for the man who has formed the habit of deliberate, purposeful thought. Every repetition of his definite purpose deepens the groove. Every morning he claims with a spoken intention makes the claiming easier the next morning. Nature, observing the pattern, cooperates with it. The purpose more present, the sense of direction more automatic. But this law works with equal efficiency against the man who has formed the habit of waking into drift. Every morning he permits the feeling of being behind settle unopposed into his conscious mind. The groove of that feeling is deepened. Nature does not evaluate the quality of the habit she is making permanent. She only counts the repetitions. And so the man who wakes into heaviness 10 mornings in succession without deliberately interrupting the pattern is commissioning nature to make that heaviness the automatic condition of his waking. And the cruel efficiency of this law means that eventually the man does not need any fresh evidence of defeat to feel defeated. The groove carries him there without evidence. The needle finds it automatically. He opens his eyes and the feeling is already present, inherited from nothing more than the preceding day's repetition of the same feeling. This is not weakness character. It is the operation of a natural law upon an unguarded mind. The fear of poverty, which is, for most men who wake feeling behind, the deepest operating fear beneath the surface of the head they feel, is a state of mind. Nothing else. But as a state of mind, it is capable of destroying a man's capacity for achievement, the completeness that no external adversity could match. It paralyzes the faculty of reason. It destroys the faculty of imagination. It kills off self-reliance, undermines enthusiasm, discourages initiative, and leads to an uncertainty of purpose that makes every morning feel like an attempt to walk forward in deep mud. And it does all of this because it has been permitted to occupy the dominant position in the mind through repetition, through habit, through the accumulated effect of mornings that were not claimed. The interruption of this pattern requires only one thing: not discipline applied across an entire day, not the reformation of a character, not the resolution that is made on the first morning of a new season and abandoned by the third. It requires the deliberate claiming of a single moment, the first moment of waking before the groove has had time to assert itself. That moment is the fault line. That moment is where the 3 feet of gold are waiting every single morning for the man with the courage to drill one more time rather than pick up his tools and go home. Part 3. The precise internal act that reclaims the day before it has begun. I want to describe the one move, not in abstract terms, not as a principle that requires further translation into practice before it can be applied. I want to give it to you with the same precision with which a man gives another man the combination to a lock, because the subconscious mind operates on precision, and a vague instruction to it is no instruction at all. But first, let me tell you something about a young man who understood this principle. Not from a book, not from a teacher, but from the force of a desire so consuming that it organized itself into the precise mental posture that the principle requires. He had nothing. Not money enough to purchase a railroad ticket to the city where the man he sought had his laboratory. Not education sufficient to impress anyone who might have examined his credentials. Not a single connection to the world he intended to enter. He arrived at that laboratory looking, by the account of those present, more like a man down on his fortune than a man on the threshold of a great partnership. And yet Edison, who was one of the keenest judges of men who ever lived, looked into that young man's face and saw something that his circumstances gave no evidence of, and that his appearance gave no hint of, and that the rational examination of his qualifications would have found no basis for. Edison saw a decision. He said of that encounter, years afterward, that there was something in the expression of the young man's face which told him this man had made up his mind. Absolutely, without reservation, without any interior alternative, and that he would stand by that decision, satisfied or until he was finished. Edison gave him a position on the basis of that look alone, because in all his years of working with me, he had learned that when a man truly desires a thing with quality of certainty, he is sure to win. The young man was Edwin C. Barnes, and the desire he had been carrying before he ever stood in Edison's presence was not merely a wish he entertained. It was a statement he had been making to himself repeatedly, with full emotion and full conviction. He had been practicing the one move long before he was in a position to execute it pointed to. And the move had done what it all does to the man who practices it with genuine force. It had organized his subconscious mind around his purpose so completely that the conviction had become visible in his face. The one morning move is this: a written statement of your definite chief aim. Not a vague expression of what you generally wish for, a precise declaration of what you intend to have by what date and what you will give in return, spoken aloud with full feeling in the first moments after you open your eyes. Not thought, not recalled from memory and silence while you lie still, spoken aloud, so that your own voice enters the room and your ears receive the words, and the emotion in them passes through every channel available to the subconscious mind simultaneously. The voice is not a formality in this practice. It is not an affectation or a ritual invented for its own sake. The subconscious mind responds to thought impulses that are mixed with emotion far more powerfully than to thought alone. And the act of speaking, of engaging the body in the production of the words, of hearing one's own voice declare the intention in the silence of a room produces the feeling that silent reading does not reliably produce. The whole man. And the whole man engaged with conviction sends a command to the subconscious mind that the subconscious mind cannot ignore. Here's the self-confidence formula I have given to men and women across the whole of my career as a teacher of this philosophy. And here's the reason each element of it matters. The first element is a statement of belief in your own capacity to achieve the object of your definite purpose. Not expressed as hope, but as knowledge. I know that I have the ability to achieve the object of my definite purpose. Therefore, I demand of myself persistent, continuous action toward its attainment. The word demand is not accidental. The man who asks of himself is easily refused. The man who demands of himself has placed the burden of performance where it belongs upon his own will and left no comfortable exit. The second element is 30 minutes of concentrated thought daily upon the person you intend to become, not the person your purpose requires you to be. You create a clear mental picture of this person, and you hold it in your conscious mind until the subconscious takes it up. This practice, maintained with persistence, begins to build in the subconscious mind a blueprint that the mind then works to satisfy. The person pictured begins through the automatic operation of the subconscious to attract circumstances, decisions, and opportunities that harmonize with him. The third element is a daily demand for the development of self-confidence through auto-suggestion, not as a statement of what you have already achieved, but as a command to the subconscious mind to develop the quality you need. The fourth element is a clear written description of your definite chief aim covering a specific period of time. Not a description of your general intentions, a description of the specific thing you intend to have by a specific date through a specific plan that you intend to execute. This written statement is then placed in two locations. One where you will see it repeatedly during the day, and one in the room where it can be read with full conviction before you close your eyes at night, and again in the first moment after you open them. The statement is read before sleep. The subconscious receives it as its commission. It works on it through the night. The statement is read again upon waking. The subconscious receives the confirmation of the commission, and the day begins with the purpose already active, already engaged, already organizing the faculties of the mind toward its attainment. Now I want to address directly the man who will read this and think, this is too simple. This is too simple. Surely a practice so elementary cannot produce the results claimed for it. Surely something more complex, something more taxing is required before a man's morning, and through his morning, his day, and through his days, his life can be remade. To that man, I say only this: the most powerful laws in the natural world are the simplest. The law of gravitation is simple. The law that governs the growth of a seed is simple. The principle by which the subconscious mind is instructed is simple. But simple does not mean weak. The law of gravitation is simple, and it holds the earth in its orbit. The principle by which the subconscious mind receives and acts upon repeated emotionalized instruction is simple, and it has built the greatest fortunes, produced the most extraordinary achievements, and remade the most thoroughly defeated lives in the history of men I have studied. One condition must be met, and it is not negotiable. The words must carry emotion. Plain, unemotional words do not influence the subconscious mind. The statement read, "In the tone of a man performing an obligation, read with the flatness of a man going through a motion, rather than issuing a command, will produce nothing." The subconscious mind is moved by feeling. The feeling of certainty, the feeling of a man who has decided and does not entertain alternatives. That feeling mixed with the spoken words is the agent of instruction. Without it, you are speaking to a wall. This is why I say that the one morning move is an internal act, not an external one. The speaking of the words is its outward form. The internal act is the genuine, full-bodied conviction that the thing stated is as real as anything you have touched with your hands. You must speak it as a man who knows, not as a man who hopes. Part 4. The men who use the morning and the men who let it use them. What 25 years of evidence reveals about the first hour and 25 years of studying the habits of men who achieved great things and men who did not. I discovered a consistency so that I eventually ceased to regard it as an observation and began to regard it as a law. The men who arrived at great results in every field, across every variety of temperament and circumstance, had in some form taken possession of their minds before the day took possession of them. This possession took different shapes in different men. Some performed it consciously through the deliberate practice of autosuggestion. Others stumbled upon it through the force of a desire so consuming that the practice organized itself without instruction. But the pattern was there in every case. The mind had been claimed before the drift of the day could claim it. The men who did not arrive, and I studied these with equal care, had in common an absence of this practice and a presence of something else, the habit of permitting the day to set the terms of their thinking before they had set any term of their own. Now I want to name for you what the unclaimed morning does to a man, because the honest thing is the first step toward its mastery. The unclaimed morning delivers the man into the full force of whatever dominated his mind the night before. If what dominated his mind was worry, the fear of debt, of failure, of judgment, of circumstances he cannot control, then the morning delivers him into that worry with unusual force, because the subconscious has been working on it all night and has found nothing to balance it with. The worry is larger in the morning than it was when he closed his eyes. Indifference, the willingness to accept whatever compensation life may offer without protest, the lack of initiative, the absence of enthusiasm. These are not character defects in the man who suffers from them. They are the symptoms of a mind that has been given over morning after morning to the operation of the fear of poverty without any deliberate thought to counteract it. The man does not choose indifference. He wakes into it because he has been commissioning it. Procrastination, the habit of putting off until tomorrow what should have been done last year, the spending of energy on excuses rather than on the work itself, is the same. It is not laziness in the ordinary sense. It is the frozen condition of a mind that has been dominated by doubt and overcaution for so long that the habit of action has been replaced by the habit of deferral, and that replacement happened primarily in the mornings that were not claimed. Indecision, the habit of staying on the fence, of permitting circumstances and the opinions of others to make choices that a man should make for himself, is the seedling of fear. And fear left without the counterforce of a deliberate, spoken, emotionalized purpose grows in the unguarded mind the way weeds grow in an untended field. not because anyone planned them, because nothing more desirable was planted first. I want you to observe now what happens when the morning is cleansed. The definite purpose planted the night before with conviction and read again at the waking with full emotion does not merely encourage the man who practices it. It reorganizes him. His mind, which had been in the absence of a commanding purpose, subject to the influence of every negative impression that drifted past it, now has a center, and that center functions as a magnet. Everything that harmonizes with the purpose becomes visible to the man who carries it in a way it was not visible the morning before. Opportunity does not become more abundant. It was always there. But the mind organized around a definite purpose develops a selective attention, an orientation toward the things that serve its purpose and away from the things that do not, that the drifting mind entirely lacks. I have taught this practice to men who woke every morning, as you may have done, into the heaviness of having too much to do and not enough force to do it with. Men who had ceased to believe that the situation of their lives could be materially altered by the act of their own. Men who had accepted drift as their permanent condition, the way a man accepts the weather as a thing one must rather than a thing one may influence. And I have observed in every case where the practice was applied with genuine conviction and genuine persistence, not for a morning or a week, but as the iron habit of daily life that the man who woke behind began within a period that varied but never exceeded several months to wake into something else. Not abundance necessarily at first, but direction. The specific, calm, organized sense of direction that belongs to the man who knows what he is for and has told his subconscious mind what it is to work on. That sense of direction is the thing that dissolves the feeling of being behind. Not because the circumstances have changed, though they will change in time, but because the man who carries a definite purpose does not measure his morning against the accumulated weight of what has not yet been accomplished. He measures it against the single question that every morning presents to the man who has claimed it. What is the one action I can take today that will carry me one step nearer the attainment of my definite chief aim? That question, asked with the conviction of a man who has been planting his purpose in his subconscious mind for months, who has been waking into it every morning, who has been permitting it to grow through the work the subconscious performs while he sleeps, is not a heavy question. It is a liberating one. It reduces the enormous and paralyzing complexity of a drifting life to a single manageable demand. One step, and one step taken every day is all that the greatest railroad in the West required. Hill did not build it in a morning. He built it one step at a time, sustained by a purpose that his mind had been organized around every morning before the first rail was laid. Part 5. The day that belongs to you begins before you stand up. The closing identity challenge and the precise practice to begin tonight. I want to speak to you now, not as a teacher delivering instruction, but as a man who has stood where you are standing, who has woken into the exact heaviness you have woken into, who has known the feeling of being behind before the day has made a single demand, and who has found, through the most rigorous application of the principles I have organized from 25 years of research into the lives of both the great and the defeated, the precise practice that transforms the morning from something that happens to a man into something the man commands. The one morning move is not a technique invented for the comfort of those who prefer pleasant mornings. It is the application of a law as indifferent to your preferences and as its operation as the law that governs the motion of the earth. Here is the law stated plainly. Whatever thought a man implants in his subconscious mind through repetition mixed with emotion and conviction, the subconscious mind will work upon and return to the conscious mind in a form attainment of the thought's object. It will do this during sleep as readily as during the waking hours. It will do it for the man who plants fear as readily as for the man who plants purpose. It does not prefer the one over the other. It simply works on what it is given. The one morning move is their deliberate choice to be the man who gives the conscious mind something worthy of its capacity, rather than the man who permits the accumulated impressions of a drifting day to give it something that touches him. Here is the precise practice as I have refined it across the full span of my work. Tonight, before you close your eyes, you will write, if you have not already written, a clear and specific statement of your definite chief aim. It will name what you intend to have, and by what date and what you intend to give in return, and through what plan you intend to attain it. It will be written in the first person as a statement of certainty. Not I hope to have this, not I would like to have this, but I will have this. You will sign it. You will place a copy where you will see it throughout the day, and another copy in the room where you sleep. Then, in the minutes before you close your eyes, you will read that statement aloud, not in a whisper, not in the flat, mechanical tone of a man reading a document, aloud, with the full force of your conviction, with the feeling of a man who has already decided and does not entertain alternatives. You will read it until the feeling behind the words is genuine, not performed, but real. Then, you will close your eyes and give the statement with the confidence that it will be carried out. You will also speak 12 times in the moments just before sleep the following. Tomorrow I will do everything that should be done when it should be done and as it should be done. I will perform the most difficult task first because this will destroy the habit of procrastination and develop the habit of action in its place. Not once, 12 times aloud. The repetition is not arbitrary. It is the mechanism by which the instruction reaches the subconscious mind with sufficient force to be carried out. In the morning before you stand, before you speak to another person, before the first demand of the day has reached you, you will open your eyes and read the statement again aloud with the conviction you brought to it the night before. That is all. Not a schedule, not a system of tasks, not a complicated arrangement of disciplines designed to fill the morning with productive activity before the mind has been claimed for the day. One move. The claiming of the mind before the drift can claim it. The planting of the purpose before the fears can assert their grip. The commissioning of the subconscious mind before the day fills it with the impressions of circumstance. Now, I want to address the man who is tempted to try this for a morning or a week and then judge it by the result of a morning or a week. The subconscious mind is changed through habit, not through single acts. The groove that the morning heaviness has worn into your mind was not cut by a single morning. It was cut by many mornings, repeated without interruption, deepened by nature's law of hypnotic rhythm, into something that no longer requires effort to maintain. The new groove, the groove of deliberate purpose, planted with conviction every morning and every night, requires not months of perfect performance, months of persistent repetition. The standard is not perfection. It is the refusal to accept drift as permanent. The man who misses a morning does not begin again at nothing. He begins again where he left off. And the law of hypnotic rhythm will work for him as readily as it has been working against him once the dominant habit of his mind has shifted from drift to purpose. But it will not shift from a single application. It will shift from the daily sustained, emotionalized repetition of the practice I have described. I will tell you what will happen when it does. You will begin to wake into something that has no name in the vocabulary of the man who has never experienced it from within. It is not excitement. Excitement is the province of the beginning, and it fades. It is not optimism, which is favorable interpretations of uncertain circumstances. It is a quiet, specific, organized certainty, the certainty of a man who knows what he is for, who has told his subconscious mind what it is to work on, and who wakes each morning to find that the work has been done. Plans appear in this state of mind that were not visible the morning before. Decisions that paralyzed become simple. The feeling of being behind, which was, as I told you at the beginning, never a report on your circumstances, but always a report on the state of your mind, loses its grip. Not because the circumstances have changed, but because the mind has been reorganized around something that outweighs the heaviness of accumulated drift. And then one morning, perhaps sooner than you expect. Full conviction, perhaps longer. If you practice with only partial faith, you will open your eyes, and the first thing that occupies your mind will not be the feeling that you are behind. It will be your purpose, present, organized, and working. That is the morning that belongs to you. Now hear me, and hear me clearly, because this is the last thing I will say. The decision to begin this practice is not a small one. It is the decision to take possession of your own mind, the only thing over which you have absolute control. The only instrument through which every material thing you will ever have must first pass in the form of thought. It is the decision to stop being the kind of man to whom mornings happen and to become the kind of man who happens to. That decision cannot be made tomorrow. The man who will make it tomorrow has already begun practicing the only habit that prevents him from making it today. The practice begins tonight. The statement goes on paper tonight. The words are spoken aloud tonight. The subconscious mind receives its commission tonight. And when you open your eyes tomorrow morning, the first words out of your mouth, spoken with conviction, with the emotion of a man who has decided, will be the words of your purpose. That is the one morning move. And the day that follows it will not feel the same as any day that came before. If you are ready to become, I created the Second Life to give you a full path built from timeless success principles so you can finally change for real and begin creating more wealth, better health, stronger relationships, inner peace, and a life that truly reflects your potential.